finally learned factoring today. You've been doing some practice with diamond problems, and the intention of those diamond problems is to help you figure out the combinations that you're going to need when you're factoring. I apologize for the shadow and the glare. I've done everything that I can do to try to eliminate it other than videoing at night. That might be my next option. Okay, so our learning target for this video time is going to be, I can factor a trinomial. Now, factoring is probably a new word to you, but factoring undoes what multiplying binomials together do. So a problem is going to look something like this, for example. Factor x squared plus x minus 72. So your job will be to figure out what binomials would I multiply together that would give me x squared plus x minus 72. But before we do that, let's take a look at what happens when we multiply binomials together and the numbers that we get and where those numbers would go in our diamond so that it will help us with factoring. So kind of back to the multiplying process. We're going to multiply x plus 9 times the quantity x minus 2. And I'm a box method person, so I prefer to work with that. So x times x is x squared. X times negative 2 is negative 2x. X times 9 is 9x. And in a little bit, I'm going to add them together, which is going to result in a sum that we will be able to use in this spot in our diamond. My next step is to do 9 times negative 2. When I multiply 9 times negative 2, I'm finding the product of those two numbers. I get negative 18, and that's the number that's going to go in the product spot of our diamond. So now I have a negative 18 here. The sum that I get when I add these like terms is 7x, or just 7, because I need the numbers for my diamond. So now my job would be to figure out, if I was doing a factoring problem on this instead of a multiplying problem, my job would be to take those two numbers and figure out what am I multiplying together to get negative 18, but adding together to get 7. Also, watch what happens when I write my answer to this multiplication problem. X squared plus 7x. There's my sum, which is always going to be my number that goes down in the bottom of my diamond. Minus 18, which is the product of negative 2 times 9. That's going to be my number that always goes in the top part of the diamond. So now if I want to figure out two numbers I multiply together to get negative 18, but add up to give me a positive 7, I know one has to be negative, and it has to be the smaller one so that I can add up to get a sum that's positive. So I know that 9 times 2 gives me 18, or 9 times 2 gives me negative 18, and 9 plus negative 2 will give me 7. So let's see how this diamond helps us in our factoring process. We'll go back to the problem that I had from before. So one thing that I like to use my box for, rather than just multiplying binomials, is to work with factoring as well. But after doing some of these diamond problems, you might realize you don't need it as much as maybe I thought that I did in the past. So I know that when I use my box method to multiply two binomials, I know that the x squared always ends up here. So I'm going to put that there for now. And I also know that the negative 72, or this product down here at the end, always ends up down here in this corner. So now my job is to figure out what are the things I multiply together in these spots that give me these numbers. So I know I do x times x, but the question might be, what is it that I really do to get multiply together to get a negative 72? And that's where your diamond can come in to help you. So if I make my diamond, I know I have my product up here, which is negative 72. The sum that I'm supposed to get is the number that's in front of this middle term, which right now happens to be a 1. So I need two numbers that multiply together to give me negative 72. One of them has to be negative, but still adds up to be a positive 1. So I'm going to have a negative and a positive. I know that 9 times 8 is 72, and I also know that 9 and 8 are 1 apart from each other. So it seems to be that 9 and 8 would be my combination, but since I need to get a positive one when I add them together, that tells me that my larger number has to be the positive one. Exactly what you were doing in your diamond problems on your practice yesterday and the day before. So now that tells me that one of these binomials should have a -8 and the other one should have a +9. And if you want to fill in the rest of your box the whole way through, you can do that. That way you're kind of checking your work as you go, so to speak. So -8 times x would be -8x. 9 times x would be 9x. And I know that 9x minus 8x does give me a positive 1x. So it looks like my combination for my factors, which I'm always going to find over here and on the top of the box if I'm using that box method, are what would go inside of the parentheses. And because multiplication is commutative, it doesn't matter if I put the x minus 8 first or the x plus 9 first. Okay, let's try some other ones. And because the red marker doesn't erase very well, I'm probably going to use the black marker from now on out, just so that we can make this a little bit quicker for you guys. All right, let's try to factor x squared minus 12x plus 32. So I know that my job for factoring is to find out the two binomials that I'm going to multiply together to give me x squared minus 12x plus 32. So if I'm doing my box method, I know that when I multiply, my x squared always goes here. And x times x is what gives me x squared. And I know that my constant always lands down here in my box method. So I'm trying to figure out what numbers I multiply together to give myself 32, but yet add up to the -12 that's in the middle. And now that I've used these diamonds, I'm really beginning to think that for the factoring part, maybe I don't have to be as worried about what these numbers are that fill in my box like I had taught my students last year. So now I need two numbers that multiply together to give me 32 that add up to -12. And you can think of all the possibilities that are out there, whatever you had to do when you were doing your diamond problems practice online the last couple of days. But I know that 8 times 4 gives me 32, but it won't add up to -12. So from there, the only other way I can get a positive 32 is if both of those are negative. So now these two numbers right here are the two numbers that are going to finish off my binomials for what I would multiply together to get x squared minus 12x plus 32. And if you're not sure that that's right, then use whatever method you prefer to multiply those two together, because you should get back to the original problem that we started with. Okay, I'm going to jump to the problem that I saved for last. I'm going to jump to that one now. That way, if you think you have it, you can stop the video. My plan was to do 2 more practice problems, but I'm going to jump to the last one first so that you see this example, because I know it's going to come up for you later on. So what happens if all I have is a quadratic that looks like this? X squared minus 81. Well, in order for this to work, there really has to be a middle term in this problem. It just so happens that this time the middle term isn't in there, because what it really added up to, x squared plus 0x minus 81. And if you did your practice from the previous day, you might remember a diamond that used these two particular numbers in them. The product in my diamond is going to be the negative 81, which is always the constant. And the sum for my diamond is always the number that's in front of the x term. We don't worry about the x squared, just the constant and the x term. Now I have to find out two numbers that I multiply together to get negative 81 that add up to 0. And those two numbers have to be opposites of each other. A negative 9 and a positive 9. I believe that was the first problem that you did on your More Diamond practice problems. So x minus 9 times x plus 9. When I multiply that using the box method, or when I multiply them using the FOIL method, I should get x squared minus 81. So if you think you got it, you're more than welcome to go do the practice right now, and I'm going to do one more factoring. Okay, x squared plus 4x minus 21. And I know I need two binomials to multiply together to get that. I also know that it's going to be x times x that gives me the x squared. So you can always go fill them in right away. All right, so here's my diamond. I have a negative 21 for my constant and a positive 4 for my sum. I need two numbers that I multiply together to get negative 21 and that add up to 4. I know one of them has to be negative to get a product of negative 21, but because my sum is positive, that tells me my larger one needs to be the positive number. And I know that 7 plus negative 3 gives me 4, and 7 times negative 3 gives me negative 21. So that tells me that I have a minus 3 and a positive 7 to fill in the ends of my binomials. And again, if you go through and multiply those together using whatever method you prefer, FOIL or the box method, you should get right back to this trinomial right here that our original problem started with.